At 33, I believed I was simply unhireable. Every job offer died in a chilly silence I could not explain. I did not know my parents were the ones calling, warning strangers that their daughter was a thief to force me back under their control. But they made a critical error. They did not realize my grandmother had been quietly documenting every lie for a decade, waiting for the moment I was finally ready to burn their narrative to the ground. The radiator in the waiting room of Harbor Light Logistics clanked with a rhythm that matched the hammering of my heart. I smoothed the fabric of my skirt for the 10th time, checking the hem for lint that was not there. At 33, having to interview for a mid-level operations manager role should have felt routine. It should have been just another step in a career I had spent a decade building. Instead, it felt like a desperate plea for survival. I had been out of steady work for 4 months. My savings account, once a source of quiet pride, had dwindled to a terrifying double-digit number that kept me awake at 3 a.m. Briar Glen, Massachusetts, was not a forgiving place to be unemployed. The autumn wind off the river cut through cheap coats, and the cost of rent seemed to rise with the tide. Mr. Henderson, the hiring manager, opened the door. He was a man with a firm handshake and eyes that actually crinkled when he smiled. He did not look at me with the skepticism I had grown used to over the last few weeks. He looked at me like I was a solution to his problems. "Alice, looking at your resume, you are exactly what we need to clean up our supply chain," he said 20 minutes later. His pen tapped against my folder. "I like your tenure at your last firm. 5 years shows loyalty. We value that here." I felt the tension in my shoulders finally begin to unspool. The interview flowed. We talked about logistics software, about managing temperamental drivers, about the time I reorganized a failing warehouse layout in 3 days. By the time I stood up to leave, the air in the room had shifted from evaluation to recruitment. I cannot make an official offer until HR clears the standard checks. "Mr. Henderson said, walking me to the elevator, "but between you and me, I would suggest you do not take any other interviews this week. I think you are going to be very busy here starting Monday." I walked out of the building and into the gray afternoon light, feeling lightheaded. I called my grandmother, Elena, from the parking lot. "I think I got it." "Grandma," I said, my voice shaking, "I think I can finally pay my rent next month without asking the landlord for an extension." "Good," she said. Her voice was raspier than it used to be, but it still held that ironclad warmth I relied on. "You deserve it. Alice, you have worked hard. Just keep your head down until the paper is signed." I went home to my apartment, a drafty second-floor walk-up that smelled faintly of old coffee and my neighbor's cigarettes. And I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. I waited for the call. It did not come on Thursday. On Friday morning, the phone rang. It was not Mr. Henderson. It was a woman from Human Resources. Her voice clipped and distant, stripped of the warmth I had experienced in the interview room. "Ms. Sanchez, we are calling to update you on your candidacy," she said. My stomach turned over. I sat down at my kitchen table, gripping the edge. "Yes? We have decided to pause the hiring process for this role," she said. "We are going to move in a different direction." I blinked, the room suddenly feeling very small. "But Mr. Henderson said I was the top candidate. He practically offered me the job." "Mr. Henderson was premature," she said. Her tone was defensive. A wall going up. "After completing our reference checks and due diligence, we feel you are not the right fit for the culture at Harbor Light." "Culture?" I asked. "I do not understand. My references are stellar. I have never had a bad review in my life. We wish you the best of luck in your search," she said. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the apartment pressing in on my ears. It made no sense. I had left my last job on good terms. My former boss, David, had promised to write me a glowing recommendation. I had never stolen so much as a post-it note. I was the person who stayed late to fix other people's mistakes. I needed a second opinion. I needed to know if I was losing my mind. I met Dana Wexler at a diner on the south side of town 3 hours later. Dana and I had worked together 2 jobs ago. She was the kind of friend who knew where the bodies were buried because she had usually helped dig the holes. She was currently working in administration at a large dental practice, but she still knew everyone in the local administrative circuit. I ordered black coffee. Dana ordered a milkshake and looked at me with pity that made my skin crawl. "It does not make sense." "Dana," I said, leaning over the Formica table. "Mr. Henderson loved me. Then HR steps in and suddenly I am a pariah? What could they have found? My credit is mediocre." "Sure, but not disqualifying. My record is clean." Dana stirred her milkshake with her straw, not meeting my eyes. She looked uncomfortable. "Alice, I heard something." My heart stopped. "What did you hear?" She looked around the diner to make sure no one was listening. "I have a friend in HR at Harbor Light. I called her when you told me you were interviewing. I wanted to put in a good word." "And?" "She told me they were ready to print your offer letter." Dana said quietly. Then they got a call. "A call from who?" "She does not know the name. But she said the person claimed to be a former employer. They said there were discrepancies in your past. Cash discrepancies." I stared at her. The noise of the diner faded into a dull roar. "Cash?" "They said you were let go from a previous position because of missing petty cash," Dana whispered. "They said you were smart about it, that you never got caught on camera, but that everyone knew. They framed it as a warning, protecting the community." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I have never stolen a dime. You know that." "I know that," Dana said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "But Alice, in this town, an accusation like that is worse than a conviction. A conviction requires proof. A rumor just requires ears." I pulled my hand away. "Who would say that?" "I do not know," Dana said, "but whoever it is, they sound credible. My friend said the HR director looked spooked. They did not want to take the risk." I went home and immediately requested a copy of my official background check online. I paid the rush fee, my fingers trembling as I typed in my credit card number. It came back 2 hours later. Clean, no criminal record, no civil judgments, no flags. The poison was not in the database. It was in the air. I picked up the phone and called David, my manager from my most recent job. He had been a mentor to me. If anyone was bad-mouthing me, surely he would tell me. "Hello?" David answered on the third ring. He sounded out of breath. "Hi. David, it is Alice Sanchez," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, Alice." There was a pause, a long, heavy pause that told me everything I needed to know. "I am sorry to bother you." I said, "I am just reaching out because I lost a job offer today. Harbor Light Logistics. They said something came up in the reference checks. I just wanted to make sure." "I gave you a standard reference." "Alice," David interrupted. His voice was tight, higher than usual. "Dates of employment, job title. That is it. Did anyone call you asking about—" "Theft?" I asked. David went silent. I could hear him breathing on the other line. "Alice, look," he said finally. "We do not want any trouble here. We just want to move on. I cannot discuss internal matters." "Internal matters?" I asked, my voice rising. "David, I laid out the inventory system for you. I trained your staff. What internal matters? Please do not call here again," he said. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand, the dial tone buzzing like a furious insect. David was scared. He was not angry. He was terrified of a conflict he wanted no part of. Someone had gotten to him. Someone had told him a story so convincing, or threatened him with something so annoying, that he had decided throwing me under the bus was the path of least resistance. I had one other iron in the fire: Crescent Ridge Medical Billing. It was a step down in responsibility and pay, but it was a job. I had done a phone screen with them 2 days ago, and the recruiter, a woman named Kelly, had been enthusiastic. I waited until Monday morning. I needed to know if this was a fluke or a pattern. I called Kelly at Crescent Ridge. It went to voicemail. I left a polite message. 2 hours later, I got an email. "Dear Ms. Sanchez, while your qualifications are impressive, we have decided to pursue other candidates at this time." I stared at the screen. This time, I did not just accept it. I called Kelly back. I called 3 times in a row until she finally picked up, sounding flustered. "Kelly, please," I said, cutting off her standard greeting. "I am not trying to be difficult. I just need to know. Was it a reference?" "Alice, I cannot." She started. "Please," I begged. "I am losing my mind. I am a good worker. I have never stolen anything. Someone is lying about me." There was a silence on the line. Then, Kelly's voice dropped to a whisper. "We received a call," she said. "From whom?" "A family member," she said. My hand froze on the phone. "A family member?" "They said they were worried about you," Kelly said. "They said you have had struggles with honesty, with money. They told us we should not put you in a position where you handle finances. For your own good." "Who was it?" I whispered. "It was a woman," Kelly said. She sounded very concerned. It sounded serious. "Alice, I am sorry. We handle medical payments. We cannot take the risk." She hung up. A woman, concerned. For my own good. The room spun. I knew that tone. I knew that script. It was the same script that had been used to explain why I could not go to the state university 10 years ago. It is too much pressure for her. It was the script used to explain why I should not move to the city. She is not street smart. She will get hurt. It was my mother. I drove to Larkspur Hollow that evening. The suburb was a grid of manicured lawns and houses that all looked like they were wearing beige uniforms. My parents' house sat in the middle of a cul-de-sac, the windows glowing with a warm, inviting light that I knew was a lie. I had a key. But I rang the bell. I needed the barrier. My father, Dennis, opened the door. He was wearing a cardigan I had bought him for Christmas 3 years ago. His face was soft, round, and wore a permanent expression of mild confusion that masked a spine of steel. "Alice," he said, blinking, "we were not expecting you. Is everything all right?" I walked past him into the kitchen. My mother, Marla, was at the stove. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and roasted chicken. It was the smell of my childhood. A smell that used to mean safety, and now made my stomach turn. Marla turned around. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked impeccable, as always. Her hair was sprayed into place. Her blouse was crisp. "Alice," she said, "you look tired. Are you eating enough?" I stood by the island, gripping the granite countertop. "Did you call Crescent Ridge Medical Billing?" Marla paused. She placed the towel on the counter, smoothing out the wrinkles with slow, deliberate movements. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice shaking. "The recruiter told me. A family member called. A woman. She said I was a thief. She said I had struggles with honesty." Dennis walked into the kitchen, standing slightly behind Marla, reinforcing her. "Alice, keep your voice down. The neighbors. Did you tell Harborlight Logistics I stole petty cash?" I asked, turning to look at him. "Did you scare David into silence?" Marla sighed. It was a long, suffering sound. "Alice, you are being hysterical. This is exactly what we worry about. You get so worked up." "I am not worked up," I yelled. "I am unemployed. I cannot get a job because someone is sabotaging me. Why would you do that? I am your daughter." Marla looked at me with eyes that were terrifyingly void of empathy. They were flat, brown surfaces. "We want what is best for you." "Alice," she said calmly, "how is starving best for me? You are not stable." "Alice," Dennis said. He crossed his arms. "You have been erratic lately. We just want to make sure you do not get into a situation you cannot handle." "I have been working in operations for 10 years," I screamed. "I am 33 years old." "And look at you," Marla said softly, "screaming in your mother's kitchen. Is this the behavior of a stable professional?" I stared at them. It was a trap. It was always a trap. If I got angry, I proved them right. If I stayed calm, I accepted their abuse. People deserve warnings. "Alice," Marla said, turning back to the stove to stir a pot of gravy, "if you are going to work with people's money, they have a right to know about your history." "I have no history," I said. Marla turned her head slightly. Just enough to catch my eye. We all have things we regret. Alice. Just because you have repressed them does not mean they did not happen. We are just protecting the community and protecting you from yourself. I felt like the floor was tilting. I looked at Dennis. He looked away, studying the pattern on the floor tiles. You want me to fail. I realized, the words tasting like ash. You are doing this so I run out of money. Marla did not answer. She just tapped the spoon against the side of the pot. Tap, tap, tap. I backed out of the kitchen. I felt like I was shrinking. I felt 6 years old again. Being told that I had broken a vase I had never touched. Being told that my memory was wrong, that I was a liar, that I was broken. I left the house without another word. I sat in my car in their driveway for 10 minutes, unable to put the key in the ignition because my hands were shaking so badly. I checked my phone. No emails, no missed calls, just the silence of a life that was being systematically dismantled. I drove to Maple Crest Senior Flats. My grandmother lived in Unit 4B. It was a small apartment, cluttered with books and photos, smelling of lavender and old paper. Elena Navarro was 80 years old, but her eyes were sharp as flint. She opened the door and took one look at my face. Sit, she commanded. She made tea. She did not ask me what happened until I had half a cup of the hot, sweet liquid inside me. They are doing it. Aren't not they? I said, staring into the mug. Mom and Dad. They are calling my employers. They are telling everyone I am a thief. Elena sat opposite me in her armchair. She did not look surprised. She did not look horrified. She looked resigned. What exactly did they say? She asked. They said they are protecting the community. I said, they said I have a history. Grandma. I started to question myself. I drove here wondering if maybe I did take $5 from a register once 10 years ago and forgot. I feel like I'm going crazy. That is the point, Elena said. Her voice was hard. It is not just about the job. Alice, it is about making you doubt your own reality. If you doubt yourself, you will believe them when they say you need their help. But why now? I asked. I have been independent for years. Why burn it down now? Elena leaned forward. The lamplight caught the deep lines of her face. When did this start? She asked. Specifically, when was the first rejection? I thought back. About 3 weeks ago. The temp agency dropped me. And when did you have that fight with Dennis about the papers? Elena asked. I blinked. The papers? The loan? Elena said, the temporary family loan they wanted you to co-sign, and the access to that old joint savings account from when you were a teenager. I frowned. That was a month ago. Dad came over. He said they were moving some assets around for tax purposes. He wanted me to sign off on a loan as a guarantor, just for a few weeks. He said, and he wanted the password to the savings account that has my name on it, but their money, and you said no. Elena said, of course I said no. I said, I told them I was not comfortable co-signing a loan for $50,000. I told them I wanted my name off the joint account entirely. Elena nodded slowly. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a key. Alice, listen to me, she said. This is not a tantrum. This is a siege. She stood up and walked to her small desk. She wrote something on a notepad, tore off the sheet, and handed it to me. Granite Trust Bank. She said, I have a safety deposit box there. Box number 402. You are authorized to access it. I added your name 5 years ago. What is in it? I asked. A sealed envelope, she said, and a flash drive. What is on the drive? Evidence. She said. I stared at her. Grandma, what is going on? I cannot explain it all tonight, she said. You are too fragile right now, and if I tell you everything, you will march back to that house and scream at them, and they will destroy you. You need to be cold. You need to be smart. She took my hand. Her skin was dry and cool. I knew this day might come. She said, I prayed it would not. But Marla does not handle rejection well, and Dennis does whatever she tells him to keep the peace. She squeezed my hand. I want you to go home. Alice, I want you to sit down and write a timeline. Write down every job application, every rejection, every conversation you have had with them about money in the last 6 months. Do not leave anything out. Why? Because you are going to need it, she said. Start documenting. Tonight, I left her apartment with the key burning a hole in my pocket. I drove back to my cold apartment. I did not turn on the TV. I did not check my email. I took a notebook and a pen, and I sat at the kitchen table. Timeline. I wrote at the top of the page. I worked backward. November 15th. Confrontation at parents' house. Admission of interference. November 12th. Crescent Ridge rejection. Recruiter confirms family contact. November 10th. Harbor Light Logistics offer rescinded. October 28th. Temp agency stops calling. I stared at the dates. Then I thought about the conversation with my father. October 15th. Dennis visits my apartment. I remembered the night vividly now. He had brought takeout. He had been smiling, jovial. He had laid the papers on the coffee table casually. Between the egg rolls and the fried rice, it is just a formality. Alice, we are refinancing the rental property. We just need a guarantor for the bridge loan. It will be cleared in 30 days. I had read the fine print. It was not a bridge loan for a rental property. It was a personal loan from a private lender with an interest rate that made my eyes water. And the joint account? He had claimed they needed to deposit money into it to show liquidity. I had said no. I had been firm. I am not signing that. Dad, and I'm going to the bank tomorrow to close that joint account. He had not yelled. He had just gone very quiet. He had packed up the leftover food, even the parts I was still eating, and said, "You are being very selfish. Alice, after everything we have done for you." October 16th. I wrote down. I went to the bank to close the joint account. I remembered the teller's face. "I am sorry. Ms. Sanchez, we cannot close this account without both signatures, but I can freeze it for review." I had frozen it. October 20. The first job rejection. I looked at the paper. The ink seemed to glow in the dim light. It was a straight line, cause and effect. I had refused to give them financial leverage. I had refused to take on their debt. So they had decided to take away my income. If I had no job, I would run out of money. If I ran out of money, I would lose my apartment. If I lost my apartment, I would have nowhere to go, except home. If I had to move back to Larkspur Hollow, I would be under their roof. I would be dependent. I would sign whatever they put in front of me just to have a place to sleep. It was not just pettiness. It was a strategy. They were starving me out. I put the pen down. My hand was steady now. The fear was still there, sitting heavy in my gut. But it was changing. It was hardening. They wanted me to be a thief? Fine. I would not steal their money, but I was going to steal their secrets. I looked at the key to the safety deposit box lying on the table. Grandma Elena had prepared for this. She had known. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the unemployment office to file my weekly claim. I needed every dollar. I was going to war. The office of Holt and Fenway Legal was located above a dry cleaner on the edge of downtown Briar Glen. It smelled faintly of steam and starch, mixed with the dusty scent of old law books. Kendra Holt did not look like the lawyers on television. She was a short, sharp-featured woman in her late 40s, with graying hair pulled back into a severe knot and a desk buried under mountains of manila folders. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen scratching aggressively against the paper. When I finished explaining the timeline, Grandma Elena had made me write. The rescinded offer from Harbor Light. The mysterious call to Crescent Ridge. The conversation in my parents' kitchen. Kendra finally looked up. Defamation is a difficult beast. Alice, she said. Her voice was dry, like leaves scraping over pavement. In Massachusetts, we have to prove they made a false statement of fact to a third party that caused you damage. The damage part is easy. You lost the job. The false statement part is harder. It is a lie. I said, I have never stolen anything. Kendra tapped her pen against the desk. Truth is an absolute defense. If your parents can convince a jury that they genuinely believed you stole money, or if they frame it as an opinion about your character, it gets murky. Malice is hard to prove, but intent to interfere with your livelihood? That is tortious interference. What do we do? I asked. I felt small in the chair. I had $300 in my checking account and a looming rent payment. I did not feel like a litigant. I felt like a victim. Proof is everything. Kendra said, right now, you have hearsay. We need a smoking gun. We need to catch them in the act. She leaned forward. I can draft a cease and desist letter. It is a warning shot. It tells them we are watching. It might scare them into silence, or it might make them escalate. You know them better than I do. Which way will they jump? They will play the victim, I said. They always do. Then let us give them a stage, Kendra said. But in the meantime, I want you to apply for jobs. I just told you. They are sabotaging me. I know, she said. Apply anyway. Apply for jobs you are overqualified for. Jobs that would jump to hire you. Let us see if the pattern holds. If we can document a third instance of interference after the cease and desist is sent, we have a case for a restraining order and damages. I left her office with a retainer agreement I could barely afford to sign, agreeing to a payment plan that would eat my grocery budget for the next 6 months. I went home and opened my laptop. I did not apply for management roles. I applied for administrative assistant positions. I applied for data entry gigs. I applied for a receptionist role at a dental supply firm. I cast a net so wide it felt desperate, because it was. 3 days later, the trap snapped shut. I received an email from a staffing agency recruiter named Sarah. I had interviewed with her for a temporary office manager role, a job I could have done in my sleep. The interview had been excellent. Sarah had practically promised me a start date. Then came the email. Dear Alice, regarding the position at North Main Dental, we are unable to proceed. I called her immediately. Unlike the others, Sarah picked up. She sounded young and unsure of herself. Sarah, please, I said, keeping my voice level. I am working with an attorney regarding some identity theft issues. If someone contacted you about me, I need to know. It is a legal matter. There was a long pause. I am not supposed to share this, Sarah whispered, but it was weird. Alice, we got a voicemail last night. It was really specific. Can you send it to me? I asked. Please, check your email, she said. I refreshed my inbox. A forwarded audio file appeared, along with an automated transcript. My hand shook as I clicked play. The voice that filled my small apartment was smooth, cultured, and terrifyingly familiar. Hello. This message is for the hiring manager. I am calling as a concerned mother. I understand you are considering Alice Sanchez for a position involving financial oversight. I feel a moral obligation to share that when Alice volunteered at the South Bay Community Pantry. There was an unfortunate incident involving missing petty cash. We handled it quietly as a family to protect her, but I would hate to see another organization suffer the same loss. She is a sweet girl, but she struggles with temptation. Please, be careful. The recording ended. I sat there, frozen. The room felt airless. It was Marla. It was her voice, her cadence, her faux reluctance. She is a sweet girl. The knife was wrapped in velvet. But it was the detail that stopped my heart. South Bay Community Pantry. I had not thought about that place in 5 years. I closed my eyes, dragging the memory out of the fog. I had been 28. I was between jobs, volunteering at the pantry during their holiday fundraiser drive to fill the resume gap. It had been chaos. Hundreds of donors, cash donations being stuffed into envelopes, volunteers running back and forth. There had been an envelope, $500 in cash from a local church collection. I had logged it. I had placed it in the lockbox. At the end of the night, the envelope was gone. I remembered the panic. I remembered searching the floor, the trash cans, my own purse. I remembered the director, Gerald Pike, looking at me with sad, tired eyes. I remembered my mother picking me up, talking to Gerald in the corner, her hand on his arm. She had come to the car and said, "It is taken care of. Alice, we fixed it." I had assumed she meant they had found the money, or that she had donated $500 to cover the loss, because she was generous. I had never been accused. I had never been questioned by the police. I simply stopped volunteering there because the shame of the mistake, the clumsiness of losing track of the box, was too much. Now, listening to the voicemail, I realized the truth. They had not fixed it. They had framed it. I needed to find Gerald Pike. Gerald had retired 2 years ago, but Briar Glen was a small city. I found his number in the phone book. He was old enough to still have a landline. He agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near the park, sounding wary. He looked older than I remembered. He was a man who seemed to be shrinking into his coat. He stirred his tea nervously when I sat down. "Alice," he said, "it has been a long time." I played him the recording on my phone. He listened, his eyes fixed on the table. When it finished, he did not look up. "Is it true?" "Gerald?" I asked. "Did you think I stole that money?" He sighed, a rattle in his chest. "Alice, that night was a mess. We had volunteers everywhere. We had no cameras. My mother says she handled it quietly." I said, "What does that mean?" Gerald looked out the window. "Your parents came to see me the next day. They were very intense. They told me that you had a problem, that you had taken money from them before. I felt the blood drain from my face. They told you I stole from them? They said you were going through a hard time." Gerald said, "They offered to replace the missing funds, double the amount. Actually, on one condition." "What condition?" "That we did not file a police report." He said, "That we let it go. They said a police record would ruin your life. They begged me to have mercy on you. So you assumed I did it." I whispered, "Because my parents paid you off." Gerald looked at me then, and I saw the guilt in his eyes. It was $1,000. "Alice, the pantry needed the money, and your mother. She was very convincing. She cried. She said she just wanted to save her daughter." I stood up. I felt sick. They bought my guilt. I said, "They paid for a lie so they could keep it in their pocket for 5 years. I am sorry." "Alice," Gerald said. I walked away. I did not look back. I drove straight to Holt and Fenway Legal. I gave Kendra the recording and the notes from my conversation with Gerald. "This is it," Kendra said, her eyes narrowing. "This is the false statement of fact. She is stating you stole, and we have a witness who can testify that the only reason the pantry believes you stole is because your parents told them so. Send the letter." I said, "Send it today." Kendra nodded. "I will draft the cease and desist. And Alice, brace yourself. When narcissists are cornered, they do not surrender. They attack." I left the office and went to pick up Grandma Elena. She had called me 3 times while I was with the lawyer. "We are going to the bank," she said when I arrived at her apartment. She was dressed in her Sunday best, a wool coat and a silk scarf. Though it was a Tuesday, Granite Trust Bank was an imposing stone building downtown with marble floors that echoed under our feet. Elena walked with a cane now, but she moved with a purpose that parted the crowd. We went down to the vault. The air was cool and smelled of dust and metal. The bank officer left us alone in a small private room with box 402. Elena placed the long metal box on the table and opened the lid. Inside was a large manila envelope sealed with red wax. It looked dramatic, like something from a movie. But I knew Elena. She was old-fashioned. If she wanted something sealed, she sealed it. She did not open it. Instead, she reached under the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was an index sheet, notarized and dated 3 years ago. "Read this," she said. I took the paper. It was a list of documents contained in the sealed envelope. Item 1. Correspondence with Dennis Sanchez regarding Greenridge Trust, dated 2018. Item 2. Copy of loan application, Decker and Voss Capital. Applicant, Alice Sanchez. Forged. Item 3. Bank statements. Joint account, 8840, showing transfers to Marla Sanchez. My eyes stopped at item 2. "Decker and Voss Capital?" I asked. "I have never heard of them." Elena tapped the paper with a manicured fingernail. Look at the address listed next to the application. I looked. 1440 Elm Street. Apartment 2B. That was my apartment in college. I said, I lived there for 6 months when I was 22. Elena nodded. And the date of the application? August 12th, 2015. I was in the hospital then. I said, I had my appendix out. I was recovering for a week. I was not applying for loans. Exactly. Elena said. Who is Ronan Decker? I asked. Seeing the name listed as the loan officer. He is a shark. Elena said. He runs a private lending firm that operates in the gray areas. High interest, low questions. Your parents borrowed $15,000 in your name. Alice, $15,000? I gasped. But my credit report. I checked it. It is clean. Because they paid it back. Elena said. They took the money, used it for God knows what, probably to cover the losses Dennis made in the market that year, and then paid it off 6 months later. They closed the account. It vanished from your history because it was in good standing. Then why does it matter? I asked. If the debt is gone? Because they used your identity. Alice! Elena's voice cracked, sharp and angry. They committed a felony in your name, and they have kept the paperwork. Why? Because if you ever try to leave them, really leave them, they can hold it over you, or if they need money again, they know the account exists. She put the index sheet back in the box. I am not opening the main envelope yet, she said. Why not? Because once I open it, we have to use it, Elena said. And once we use it, there is no going back. You lose your parents forever. I want you to be sure. I thought about the voicemail. She struggles with temptation. I am sure, Grandma, I said. Not yet, she said firmly. Let Kendra send her letter. Let us see if they back down. If they stop, maybe we can bury this. But if they push, then we detonate it. We left the bank. I dropped her off and drove home. My head spinning. Identity theft. My own parents. They had turned me into a financial vehicle before I had even graduated college. 2 days later, the cease and desist letter arrived at my parents' house. I knew it arrived because my phone exploded. The first call was not from my parents. It was from my Aunt Sylvia, my father's sister. Alice, what is wrong with you? She screamed the moment I answered. Hello, Aunt Sylvia, I said, bracing myself against the kitchen counter. Your mother is in the hospital, she yelled. My heart stopped. What? She had a panic attack, Sylvia shouted, because her own daughter sent her a threatening legal letter. She collapsed in the kitchen. Alice, Dennis had to call an ambulance. How could you? After everything they have done for you? She is not in the hospital, I said, my voice shaking. She is acting. Acting? Sylvia screeched. You are sick, Alice. Marla told us you were having a breakdown. She said you were paranoid. I did not want to believe it. But this? Suing your own family? I am not suing them. I said, I am asking them to stop calling my employers and calling me a thief. There you go again, Sylvia said. No one is calling anyone. They are worried about you. You are unstable. Alice, everyone can see it. Do not call me again until you apologize to your mother. The line went dead. Then came the texts. Cousins I had not spoken to in months. We heard about the letter. Really? Alice? Hope you get the help you need. Uncle Dennis is devastated. Fix this. They had circled the wagons. Marla had taken the legal threat and turned it into a weapon. She had painted me as the aggressor, the ungrateful, mentally ill daughter attacking her fragile, loving parents. I put the phone on silent. I felt like I was drowning. I walked to the refrigerator and opened it. It was almost empty. A carton of milk, 2 eggs, a jar of pickles. I looked at the calendar on the wall. It was the 5th of the month. Rent was 5 days late. I had never been late on rent. Never. I went downstairs to the first floor. Mr. Russo, my landlord, lived in 1A. He was a decent man, a retired plumber who fixed things quickly and mostly left me alone. I knocked on his door. Mr. Russo opened it, wiping tomato sauce from his lip with a napkin. Alice, hey, I was just about to come up. I have not seen the check yet. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. It was a burning, prickly shame that made me want to vanish. Mr. Russo, I am so sorry. I said, I am having a temporary cash flow issue. I am between jobs. He frowned. Alice, you know I like you. You are a good tenant. But I have property taxes. I cannot carry you. I know. I said, I just need a week. I have a final check coming from the temp agency. Please, I will pay the late fee. He looked at me. He looked at my worn shoes, my pale face. He sighed. 1 week, Alice, he said, next Friday. If it is not here, I have to post the notice. I cannot afford to be nice. I understand. I said, thank you. I walked back up the stairs. My legs felt heavy as lead. I walked into my apartment and locked the door. I slid down the wood frame until I hit the floor. I put my head in my hands. This was what they wanted. They wanted me here, humiliated, broke, begging. If I went to them now, if I drove to Larkspur Hollow and fell to my knees and apologized, they would write me a check. They would pay my rent. They would fill my fridge. All I had to do was admit I was crazy. All I had to do was sign over my freedom. I stayed on the floor for a long time. The sun went down. The apartment grew dark. My phone rang in the other room. I let it ring. It stopped. It rang again immediately. I crawled over to it. It was Elena. I picked it up. Grandma? Alice, Elena said. Her voice was different. It was not the strong, commanding voice I was used to. It was shaking. It sounded hollowed out. What is it? Are you okay? I opened it. She said, opened what? The envelope. She said, I brought it home from the bank. I could not wait. I needed to see if it was as bad as I remembered. I sat up straighter. And? Alice, listen to me, she whispered. I could hear paper rustling on the other end of the line. I could hear the shallow intake of her breath. It is worse, she said. What do you mean? I asked. I thought it was just the loan, she said. I thought it was just the control. But I'm looking at the emails between Marla and Ronan Decker. I am looking at the dates. She paused, and I heard a sound that scared me more than anything else had that day. A sob, a stifled, choked-back sob. They did not just lie about you, sweetheart, she said, her voice trembling with a rage I had never heard before. They used you. They leveraged you. The loan wasn't for the house. It was not for taxes. What was it for? I asked, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. It was a settlement. Elena said, Dennis got caught doing something he should not have at work. They needed fast cash to make it go away quietly. They used your identity to get the loan because their credit was shot. They risked your future to save his reputation. She took a breath. And Alice? They are still doing it. There is a letter here from last month. A renewal notice. They never closed the account. They just hid it. I stared into the darkness of my living room. They are still using my name? I whispered. Yes, Elena said. Come over tomorrow. We are done warning them. We are going to burn them down. The morning sun that filtered into my grandmother's kitchen felt mocking in its brightness. It was a clean, sharp light that illuminated every dust mote dancing in the air, and every jagged stroke of ink on the document spread across the small oak table. I sat with my hands in my lap, staring at a photocopy of a loan application from 5 years ago. It was a standard form from a company called Decker and Voss Capital. The borrower's name was printed clearly. Alice Maria Sanchez. The social security number was mine. The date of birth was mine. But the address listed was my old apartment on Elm Street, a place I had moved out of 6 months prior to the date on the header. And then there was the signature. It was a terrifyingly good imitation. It had the same loop on the capital A, the same sharp slash on the Z. If I had not known better, if I had been shown this in a vacuum, I might have believed I signed it during a fugue state, but I knew I had not. Look at the phone number, Elena said. She was standing behind me, her hand resting on the back of my chair. I looked at the contact line. It was a landline number. That is Mom and Dad's house, I whispered. Elena reached over and flipped the page to the second document. It was an internal email printout, something she had apparently obtained through means she was not yet ready to disclose. From marles@provider.net to rdecker@deckervoscap.com. Subject, application 9904. Ronan, thank you for pushing this through. Alice is traveling and cannot make it in to sign the final disclosures, but she has authorized me to handle the closing. We will wire the repayment within 6 months as discussed. Please keep this discreet, as she is embarrassed about needing the bridge loan. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. She had used my name to borrow money, and in the same breath, she had painted me as financially incompetent and embarrassed to a stranger. She had built the narrative of my failure even while she was robbing me. I need to check my credit, I said. Standing up, my legs felt unsteady. I need to see if it is there. I opened my laptop on Elena's table. I paid for the premium. Full history report. The one that went back 7 years and showed every closed account, every inquiry, every heartbeat of my financial life. I scrolled past my student loans. I scrolled past my credit card. And there it was. Decker and Voss Capital, personal loan, opened August 2015, closed February 2016, status, paid in full/closed by consumer. It was sitting there in the archives of my history, invisible because it was positive. It had never triggered a fraud alert because they had paid it back. They had used my creditworthiness like a battery, drained it for what they needed, and then recharged it just enough to leave no trace. They stole my identity, I said. My voice sounded flat, detached. This is a felony. Elena sat down opposite me. She looked tired. Her eyes were rimmed with red. They needed money. She said, Dennis had made some bad trades. He gambled on a tech startup that went bust, and they were facing a tax lien. They could not borrow against the house again. So they used you, and then they paid it back. I said, so they think it does not count. To them, it was just a resource. Elena said, you are a resource. Alice, you always have been. I closed the laptop. I felt a cold, hard anger crystallizing in my chest. It was different from the frantic desperation of the last few weeks. This was not fear. This was clarity. I called Kendra Holt. I met her an hour later. I showed her the loan application and the credit report. I watched her face tighten as she read Marla's email. This is identity theft, Kendra said. Pure and simple. This is criminal fraud. Can we have them arrested? I asked. Kendra leaned back in her chair. Technically? Yes. But practically? It is complicated. Why? I asked. The proof is right here. Because it was 5 years ago, Kendra said. And because they paid it back. A prosecutor might look at this and see a family dispute. Not a crime. They will argue you gave them verbal permission. They will say you signed it and forgot. They will say they were helping you build credit, without a witness or a recording of them admitting they forged it. It is your word against theirs. And juries hate sending parents to jail for borrowing money they paid back. So they get away with it? No, Kendra said. We use it. This establishes a pattern of deceit. It destroys their credibility. If they are willing to forge your name on a loan, they are willing to lie to an employer, but we need to tie it together. We need to prove the defamation is part of the same strategy. She tapped the email printout. Who is Ronan Decker? She asked. The lender. I said, find him, Kendra said. If he knew it was a forgery, he is liable. If he did not know, he was duped, and he will not be happy about it. Either way, he is a loose thread. Pull it. Decker and Voss Capital was located in a strip mall on the edge of the industrial district. Sandwiched between a chiropractic clinic and a vape shop, it was not a bank. It was a money store. The windows were tinted dark, and the sign was peeling slightly at the corners. I walked in. The air conditioning was set to Arctic. A man sat behind a glass desk, typing on a computer that looked expensive. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with slicked back hair and a suit that cost more than my car. Ronan Decker? I asked. He looked up. His eyes were cold and assessing. Can I help you? I am Alice Sanchez, I said. For a second, his face did not change. Then, a flicker of recognition passed through his eyes. He stopped typing. Alice Sanchez. He repeated, I placed the credit report on the glass desk. You issued a loan in my name 5 years ago. I said, $15,000. I never applied for it. I never signed for it. And I never received the money. Ronan stared at the paper. He did not reach for it. Ms. Sanchez, that account is closed. He said smoothly. It was paid in full. I am not sure what the issue is. The issue is fraud. I said, Ronan sighed. He stood up and walked to the door of the office. Flipping the sign to closed, he turned back to me. Look, he said, dropping the professional facade. I remember that loan. Your mother handled it. She said you were busy. She brought in the paperwork signed. And you just accepted it? I asked. Without seeing me? Without checking ID? She had your passport. Ronan said. I froze. My passport? She brought a photocopy of your passport. He said, and she had your social security card. It looked legit. And frankly, Ms. Sanchez, your mother is a very intense woman. She made it clear that if we did not fund the loan quickly, she would take the business elsewhere. He leaned against the filing cabinet. I run a volume business, he said. We do not do forensic handwriting analysis. The loan was paid. We made our interest. Everyone walked away happy. I am not happy. I said, I am unemployable because those same people are destroying my reputation. And this loan is proof that they have been using me for years. Ronan narrowed his eyes. What do you want? I want a statement, I said. I want you to sign an affidavit stating that you never met me, that Marla Sanchez brought in the paperwork, that she directed the funds to her own account. He laughed. A short, sharp bark. You want me to admit I failed to follow Know Your Customer protocols? I would be opening myself up to a lawsuit. I am not suing you. I said, I am suing them. I need a guarantee. He said, if you help me, I will sign a release. I said, I will agree not to include Decker and Voss in any civil complaint regarding the identity theft. But if you do not help me... I let the sentence hang. Ronan looked at me. He calculated the risk. He was a shark, as Elena had said. But sharks are pragmatic. I will draft a statement saying I dealt primarily with Marla Sanchez. He said, I will confirm the funds were dispersed to an account she controlled. That is it. I will not admit to negligence. It is enough. I said. I walked out of his office with a promise of an affidavit. It was the first brick in the wall I was building. But I needed more. I needed to kill the lie about the theft at the pantry. I called Dana. Dana. I said when she answered, I need you to do something illegal. I am listening, she said immediately. I need the old emails from the South Bay Community Pantry. I said, from the year of the fundraiser. Alice, I do not work there anymore, she said, but you still have the admin password for the server. Do not you? I asked. You told me once they never change it. There was a silence. It is admin 123, isn't it? I asked. Give me an hour, Dana said. 40 minutes later, my inbox pinged. It was a zip file. I scrubbed my IP address. Dana wrote in the body of the email, do not tell me how I did this. Just read the folder marked Financials. I opened the folder. I sorted by date. I went back to that December. 5 years ago, I found an email chain between Marla and the treasurer of the board. From Marla S. at provider.net to treasurer at southbaypantry.org. Subject, donation adjustment. Dear Bob, regarding the discrepancy in the cash box from the gala, I am so dreadfully embarrassed. I believe there was a mix-up with the envelopes. I have found the missing funds in my car. They must have fallen out of the box when I was helping Alice transport things. I'm sending a check for $1,000 to cover the $500 loss and an additional donation for the trouble. Please, let us keep this between us. Alice is so sensitive, and I would hate for her to feel responsible for my clumsiness. I stared at the screen. She had not accused me in writing. She had done something far more insidious. She had taken the blame, clumsiness, but framed it in a way that implied I was the one who had mishandled the transport. She had planted the seed that I was incompetent, and she was the savior cleaning up my mess. But then I found the reply from the treasurer. Marla, thank you for this. We appreciate your generosity. We will consider the matter closed. I understand how difficult it can be when family members are struggling. Your support of Alice is admirable. Struggling. She had told them something else in person. The email was the cover. The conversation was the knife. But the email proved one thing definitively. Marla had volunteered to handle the deposits. Marla had possessed the money. Marla had resolved the discrepancy. I had never touched it. I printed the emails. I called Kendra again. I have enough to confront them. I said, "Be careful," Kendra said. "In Massachusetts, we are a two-party consent state for recording. You cannot record them secretly." "I know." I said, "But if I tell them I am recording?" "If you state clearly that you are recording, and they continue to speak, that is implied consent," Kendra said. "But they will clam up the second you say it. Not if I make them think they are winning." I said, "I drove to Larkspur Hollow that night. I did not call ahead. I had a small digital recorder in my pocket. I turned it on before I got out of the car. I walked up the driveway. The house was glowing again. That deceptive warmth. I rang the bell. Marla opened it. She was wearing a silk robe. She looked annoyed. "Alice," she said, "we are eating dinner. I need to talk to you." I said. She sighed and stepped back. "Come in, but be quick." I walked into the dining room. Dennis was at the head of the table, eating a steak. He looked up, his face flushing slightly. I stood at the end of the table. I took the recorder out of my pocket and placed it on the white tablecloth. Right between the salt and pepper shakers, "I am recording this conversation." I said clearly, "For my legal records." Marla laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You are ridiculous." "Alice, turn that off." "I am not turning it off." I said, "You have been telling people I am a thief. I want you to tell me, to my face, what I stole." Dennis looked at Marla. Marla looked at the recorder, then at me. Her eyes narrowed. She did not look afraid. She looked contemptuous. "We are not playing your games." "Alice," Marla said, "if you want to record this. We are tired of your drama." I pulled the email printout from my bag and slammed it on the table. I found the emails. "Mom," I said, "from the pantry. You told them it was your clumsiness. You told them the money fell in your car. So why are you telling recruiters I took it?" Marla picked up the paper. She glanced at it and dropped it like it was a used napkin. "I was covering for you," she said smoothly. "I took the blame so you would not be humiliated. I paid the money so they would not call the police. And this is how you thank me?" "You lied," I shouted. "I never took that money." "You were unstable," Marla shouted back, her voice suddenly rising, cracking the facade. "You were out of work. You were desperate. We knew you took it. We just fixed it." Dennis slammed his fork down. "Enough," he roared. He stood up. His face was red. "Alice, stop it," he said. "We fixed that mess for you. We paid for it. Just like we paid off that loan you needed. Just like we always pay for everything." I froze. He had said it. The loan. "What loan?" I asked quietly. Dennis looked confused for a split second, realizing he had stepped onto a landmine. "The loan you took from Decker and Voss." I said, "The one you forged my signature on." Dennis looked at Marla. Panic flared in his eyes. We handled that," he stammered. "It was a family matter." "It was identity theft, Dad," I said, "and I have the application. I have the affidavit from Ronan Decker saying Mom brought it in." Marla stood up. She walked around the table and stood inches from my face. She smelled of expensive perfume and meat. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. "We did that to save this house, to save your inheritance." "My inheritance?" I asked. "Yes," she screamed. "Grandma's money. She is sitting on a gold mine. And she refuses to help us. She refuses to amend the trust." I stared at her. The pieces clicked into place. "This is not about me being a thief." I said, "This is about Grandma." Marla's face twisted. "She thinks she is so righteous. She wants to leave it all to you in a trust we cannot touch. But if you are incompetent, If you are unstable, then you get control. I finished. If I am unfit, you become the trustee. Marla stopped. She realized she had said too much. She looked at the recorder on the table. "Get out," she said. Her voice was ice cold. I picked up the recorder. "I am leaving," I said, "and I'm taking this to my lawyer. You will not work again." "Alice!" Marla screamed as I walked to the door. "I will call every company in this state. I will tell them you are a drug addict. I will tell them you are crazy. I will burn you to the ground." I slammed the front door. I sat in my car, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I played back the recording. "We fixed that mess for you. To save your inheritance, if you are incompetent, we become the trustee." I had them. I drove to Elena's apartment. I did not go home. I did not feel safe at home. I played the recording for Elena. She sat in her armchair, her eyes closed, listening to her daughter scream. When it was over, Elena opened her eyes. She did not look triumphant. She looked devastated. "It is the voting shares," she said softly. "What?" I asked. "The inheritance," she said. "It is not just cash, Alice. It is ownership in Green Ridge Supply. Your grandfather started that company. I own 40% of the stock. When I die, it goes to you. And Marla wants it." I said, "Marla and Dennis want to sell the company." Elena said, "A conglomerate has been trying to buy it for years. If they sell, they get millions. But I will never sell, and the trust ensures that when I die, you control the vote. You would have to agree to the sale. So they needed to break me." I said, "They needed me to be declared incompetent or financially unstable, so they could petition the court to take over the trust." Elena nodded. "They wanted to force you back home. They wanted you dependent. If you were living under their roof, broken and broke, you would sign anything they put in front of you." I felt a rush of vertigo. It was so cold. It was so calculated. They had not just tried to ruin my career, they had tried to annul my personhood. They wanted to turn me into a rubber stamp. I felt a sob rise in my throat. I choked it down, but another followed, and then another. I curled forward, putting my head on Elena's knee. "I loved them," I whispered. "I really loved them." "I know," Elena said, stroking my hair. "I know, sweetheart. And that is why this is the hardest thing you will ever do." She let me cry for 10 minutes. Then she tapped my shoulder. "Get up, Alice. We have work to do." She walked to her bedroom closet and pulled out a shoebox. "This is the backup," she said. "What is it?" "Copies," she said. "Of everything. The loan, the emails, my will, the trust documents. I gave the originals to Pastor Merritt at the church this afternoon." "Why the church?" "Because Marla is afraid of God," Elena said dryly. "Or at least, she is afraid of the church gossip circle. She will never accuse a pastor of lying. If these documents come from him, she cannot claim they are forged." I slept on Elena's couch. In the morning, we went to Kendra's office. We played the tape. We showed the emails. We explained the motive. Kendra sat back in her chair. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield. "This is it," she said. "We have defamation. We have tortious interference. We have fraud. And we have a clear motive: the inheritance." She pulled a file from her drawer. "I prepared the complaint last night based on what you told me," she said, "but now I can add the fraud counts." She slid the papers across the desk. "Are you ready to sign?" she asked. "Once we file this, it becomes public record. The local paper might pick it up. Your parents will be served by a sheriff. This is the point of no return." I looked at the signature line. Alice M. Sanchez, plaintiff. I thought about the interview at Harbor Light. I thought about the fear in David's voice. I thought about the way Marla had looked at me in the kitchen, like I was an obstacle, not a daughter. I signed. Kendra filed the complaint electronically that afternoon. We expected silence. We expected them to retreat, to call a lawyer, to try to settle. We underestimated their desperation. 2 days later, I was at home, trying to update my resume. When my phone rang, it was Kendra. "Alice, do not panic," She said, "What happened?" "They are escalating." She said, "We just got notified by 3 different local staffing agencies. Your parents sent a letter, a physical letter. To who?" "To everyone." Kendra said, "They sent a letter to the Chamber of Commerce. They sent one to the head of the Rotary Club, and they copied every major staffing firm in Briar Glen." "What does it say?" I asked. Kendra paused. "It says that you are currently the subject of a civil investigation for elder abuse. It says you are coercing your grandmother to change her will, and it warns employers that you are prone to litigious behavior and should be avoided." I dropped the phone. They were flipping the script. They were accusing me of exactly what they were doing. I stared at the wall. I had sued them to stop the lies, and their response was to scream the lies through a megaphone. The war had started, and I was already bleeding. The conference room at Holt and Fenway Legal was becoming my second home. It was a windowless box filled with the scent of stale coffee and the quiet rustle of paper, the sound of my life being dismantled and reconstructed in triplicate. Discovery had begun. This was the phase Kendra had warned me about, where the opposing sides exchange evidence. I had expected it to be dry. I had expected bank statements and phone logs. I had not expected fiction. Kendra slid a document across the polished table. It was a letter, typed on thick, cream-colored stationery. "This came from the discovery packet sent by your parents' defense team." Kendra said, "It is a copy of a letter Marla sent to the HR director at Harborlight Logistics the day after your interview." I picked it up. My hands were steady, but my stomach roiled. "To the hiring committee," the letter began. "As a mother, it breaks my heart to write this. However, I believe in transparency. My daughter, Alice, has a pattern of financial irregularity that you should be aware of. I have attached a timeline of incidents to illustrate the severity of her struggle." I flipped to the second page. It was a bulleted list titled Incident Log. June 12, 2018. Disappearance of household funds. Approximately $200. August 4th, 2019. Theft of jewelry from family safe. Later returned. December 10th, 2020. Misappropriation of funds during volunteer work. I stopped reading at the second date. August 4th, 2019. I said aloud. Kendra looked at me. "Does that date mean something to you?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through my photos. It took me a minute, but I found it. A picture of me and Dana, sunburned and smiling, holding oversized margaritas on a beach in Cancun. I was in Mexico. I said, "I was on a girls' trip with Dana for her 30th birthday. I have the flight records. I have the hotel receipts. I was 3,000 miles away from their safe." Kendra smiled, a sharp, predatory expression. "And the first date? June 12th? I thought about it. That was the day of my cousin's wedding in Connecticut. I was the maid of honor. I was with my parents all day. So she made it up." Kendra said, "She did not just twist the truth. She fabricated a ledger of crimes that were physically impossible for you to commit. Why would she be so sloppy?" I asked. "Marla is usually careful, because she never thought you would see this." Kendra said, "She sent this to an employer. She assumed the employer would read it, get spooked, shred it, and ghost you. She never imagined it would end up as Exhibit A in a defamation lawsuit. This is proof of malice," I said. "She knows I was in Mexico. She drove me to the airport. It is better than malice," Kendra said. "It is objective falsehood. It proves she is not a concerned mother sharing a worry. She is an architect building a prison, but the relief of the evidence was short-lived. My parents had hired Warren Sloan. I knew the name. Everyone in Briar Glen knew the name. Sloan Stratton, LLP, was the firm you hired when you wanted to scorch the earth. Warren Sloan was a man who wore 3-piece suits and smiled like he was about to eat your liver. He filed his answer to our complaint 3 days later. I read the brief in my kitchen, feeling the walls close in. Sloan did not argue that the statements were true. He argued that the lawsuit itself was an act of abuse. The plaintiff, Alice Sanchez, is a disgruntled child attempting to extort her elderly parents. The filing read, "Having failed to secure financial handouts, She is now weaponizing the legal system to inflict emotional distress on the very people who have supported her for decades. He was flipping the narrative. I was not the victim. I was the predator. The psychological weight of it was crushing. I walked through the grocery store feeling like I had a scarlet letter branded on my forehead. When I bumped into an old high school friend, Jenna, in the pasta aisle. She mumbled a quick hello and hurried away, her eyes darting to my cart as if checking to see if I had stolen the marinara sauce. My world was shrinking. I had managed to land a short-term placement at Northline Office Services, doing data entry in a back room. It was mindless work. But it paid the electric bill. I kept my head down. I did not talk to anyone. I ate lunch in my car. On a Tuesday afternoon, my supervisor, a kindly man named Mr. Abernathy, tapped me on the shoulder. "Alice, could I see you in my office?" I knew. I knew instantly. The tone was the same one I had heard at Harbor Light. It was the tone of a man who had been poisoned against me. I sat in his office. He looked uncomfortable. "We are going to have to end your assignment early," he said. "Did I make a mistake?" I asked. "Is my accuracy low?" "No, nothing like that," he said. He shuffled some papers. We had a call, a private call." "From whom?" I asked. "I cannot say." He said, "But it raised some concerns about security. We deal with sensitive client data here. Alice, we cannot take risks." I stood up. My legs felt numb. "Mr. Abernathy," I said, "whatever you were told, it is a lie. I am currently in litigation to stop the person who called you." He looked at me with pity, but it was a distant, fearful pity. "I am sorry. Alice, please gather your things." I walked out of the building with my cardboard box. I sat in my car and screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw. It was not a scream of sadness. It was a scream of impotence. Marla was not even in the room, and she was controlling my ability to buy bread. That evening, my phone rang. I almost did not answer. I assumed it was another creditor or another relative calling to tell me I was going to hell, but the number was local. "Hello?" I answered, my voice rough. "Alice? Is this Alice Sanchez?" "Yes, this is Gerald Pike." I froze. The former director of the South Bay Community Pantry, the man who had admitted to me that he let my parents buy my guilt. "Mr. Pike," I said, "why are you calling?" I received a letter," he said, "from a lawyer, Warren Sloan. He wants you to testify for them." I said, "He wants me to sign a sworn statement," Gerald said. His voice was trembling. "He wants me to state that you were dismissed for theft and that your parents made restitution. He sent a draft. It is very aggressive. Alice, it says that if I do not sign it, I could be liable for negligence for not reporting the crime back then. He is threatening you." I said, "He is squeezing me," Gerald said. "He is trying to force me to cement the lie. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I am an old man." "Alice," Gerald said, "and I am tired. I let your mother bully me 5 years ago because it was easier. I took her check because the pantry needed a new roof. But this? Destroying a young woman's life?" He paused. I heard the click of a lighter. "I am not going to sign it," he said. "Will you talk to my lawyer?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "not because I like you. Alice, I hardly know you, but because I do not like being threatened, and because I remember that night. You were the only volunteer who stayed to sweep the floors. Thank you." "Gerald," I whispered, "I do not want thanks," he said. "I just want to sleep at night." I called Kendra immediately. We had a witness. Gerald Pike was not a hero, but he was a man who resented being a pawn. That was enough. But while the legal tide was turning, the emotional toll was mounting. 2 days later, I was at Elena's apartment, helping her sort through her medication. She looked pale. Her hands, usually so capable, were shaking as she tried to open a pill bottle. "Grandma, let me do that," I said. She pushed my hand away. "I am not an invalid." "Alice." She stood up to go to the kitchen, took 2 steps, and collapsed. It was a slow, terrifying crumple. One moment she was vertical. The next she was a heap of gray wool on the carpet. "Grandma!" I screamed. I was on my knees beside her. Her skin was clammy. Her pulse was thready. I called 911. The hours in the emergency room were a blur of fluorescent lights and beeping monitors. The doctor told me it was a vasovagal syncope episode, fainting, caused by extreme stress. The doctor said, looking at me over his clipboard. "Has she been under any unusual pressure lately?" I looked at Elena, lying on the gurney, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "Yes," I said, "she's in the middle of a war." I drove her home the next morning. I tucked her into bed. I made her soup. "Alice," she said, her voice weak, "you cannot stop." I sat on the edge of the bed. "Grandma, look at you. They are killing you. Maybe we should take the settlement. Maybe we should just walk away." "No," she said. She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "If you stop now, they win. If they win, you are branded forever." I did not faint because I'm afraid of them. I fainted because I am 80 years old and I forgot to eat lunch. Don't you dare use me as an excuse to quit. I promised her I wouldn't, but I set boundaries. I took her phone. I told her she was not allowed to read any letters from Sloan. I became the gatekeeper. The next week, Kendra found the smoking gun. She called me into her office. She had her laptop open. "Look at this," she said. She turned the screen toward me. It was a forum page. Families of Addicts Support Group. It was an obscure corner of the internet, a place for people dealing with relatives who had substance abuse issues. "Look at this post from 2 years ago." Kendra said. The post was titled, "How to Protect Your Community from a Toxic Relative." If you have a family member who steals or lies, you have a duty to warn others, but you have to be careful not to get sued. Here's a template I use. Do not make direct accusations. Use phrases like struggles with honesty and financial irregularity. Frame it as concern. Say you are a heartbroken mother. It makes you untouchable. I read the template below the post. To whom it may concern. As a mother, it breaks my heart. It was identical, word for word. The letter Marla had sent to Crescent Ridge, the voicemail she left for the staffing agency. "Who posted this?" I asked. "The username is LarkspurMom88, Kendra said. "Marla," I said, "Larkspur Hollow. 1988 was the year they bought the house." She did not just write those letters out of anger. Kendra said, she researched it. She went online, found a blueprint for destroying someone's reputation legally, and copy-pasted it into your life. She planned this. Alice, she studied how to hurt you. I felt a cold chill. It was not just malice, it was industry. Marla had treated my destruction like a craft project. Then came the settlement offer. Warren Sloan sent it via courier. It was bound in a blue folder. Settlement agreement and release. The cover page read. I sat with Kendra and read the terms. Defendants, Dennis and Marla Sanchez, agree to cease all communication with plaintiff's potential employers. Defendants agree to pay $5,000 toward plaintiff's legal fees. Plaintiff agrees to dismiss the lawsuit with prejudice. It sounded good. It sounded like a win. Until I read Clause 4. Plaintiff acknowledges that past financial discrepancies occurred during her employment history and agrees that defendants acted in good faith to address said discrepancies. They want me to confess. I said, they want to formalize the lie. Kendra said, if you sign this, you are admitting you stole. You get the lawsuit dropped, but you give them a permanent legal document saying you are a thief. If you ever speak out against them again, they wave this in your face. It is a trap. I said, it is a coercive offer. Kendra agreed. They know you are running out of money. They know you lost the Northline job. They are betting you are desperate enough to sell your name for $5,000. I closed the folder. No, I said, Alice, Kendra said softly. If we reject this, we go to mediation. If mediation fails, we go to trial. It will take months. You might lose your apartment. I do not care. I said, I will live in my car. I will not sign a lie. I rejected the offer. That night, I sat in Elena's living room. The TV was off. The silence was heavy. "Grandma," I said. She was knitting. She did not look up. "Yes?" "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Why did you make the envelope?" She stopped knitting. She placed the needles on the table. "Because I watched her." Elena said. "Watched who?" "Marla." She said, "I watched her when she was a teenager. She was difficult. She always needed to be the hero. But to be the hero, she needed a victim. She needed someone to save." She looked at me. "When you were born, I was terrified. I saw the way she looked at you. Not like a baby, like a prop." She took a breath. "I saw the little things. When you were 10, and you got an A on your report card. She told the neighbors you struggled with reading, but she tutored you. When you were 16 and you made the varsity soccer team, she told the coach you had asthma and needed to be benched for your own safety. She has been doing this my whole life?" I whispered. "She needs you to be broken," Elena said, "because if you are broken, she can glue you back together, and then everyone tells her what a wonderful, saintly mother she is for taking care of such a difficult child." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I knew one day she would go too far. I knew one day she would try to break you so badly you couldn't get up. So I started keeping the receipts. I kept the bank records. I kept the letters. I promised myself I would leave you something stronger than love. Love is nice, Alice, but in a court of law, proof is better." I hugged her. I held onto her frail body and realized that she had been fighting a silent war for me since before I could speak. The next week, the court ordered mediation. It was a mandatory step before trial. We were scheduled to meet in a conference room at the courthouse with a neutral mediator. But 2 days before the session, Warren Sloan dropped the bomb. He filed a motion. Motion to compel production of medical records. The header read, "Kendra called me." Her voice was tight. "Alice, Sloan is playing dirty. What is he doing? He is claiming that Elena is not a competent witness. He is arguing that she is suffering from dementia and that you are manipulating her. He has subpoenaed her medical records from her primary care physician and the hospital where she was treated for the fainting spell." "He wants to prove she is crazy?" I asked. "He wants to discredit the evidence," Kendra said. "If he can paint Elena as confused, then the sealed envelope, the affidavit, the history, it all becomes the ramblings of a senile old woman manipulated by a greedy granddaughter. He cannot do that." I said, "She is sharp as a tack." "He can try," Kendra said. "And here's the ugly part. If we fight the subpoena, it looks like we are hiding something. If we allow it, he will drag her through the mud. He will question her doctors. He will ask about every memory lapse, every fainting spell. He will humiliate her." I thought about Elena on the gurney. I thought about her pride. "He is trying to make me choose." I said, "Yes," Kendra said. "He is betting that you love your grandmother too much to let them dissect her brain on public record. He is betting you will fold to save her dignity." I hung up the phone. I drove to the lake. I sat on the hood of my car and looked at the water. Marla and Dennis were not just attacking me anymore. They were holding a knife to my grandmother's throat. They were willing to destroy their own mother's reputation to save their lies. I had to choose. I could protect Elena's privacy and drop the case. I could sign their settlement, admit I was a thief, and vanish. Or I could fight. I could let Sloan tear into Elena's medical history. I could let them call her senile. I could drag her into the arena. I closed my eyes. I promised myself I would leave you something stronger than love. Elena had prepared for this. She had given me the weapon. She had told me not to stop. If I stopped now, her sacrifice meant nothing. I opened my eyes. I pulled out my phone and called Kendra. "File the objection to the subpoena." I said, "But tell Sloan we are not folding." "Are you sure?" Kendra asked. "It is going to get ugly." "I know." I said, "But Marla forgot one thing." "What is that?" "She thinks Elena is weak. She thinks Elena is just a confused old lady." I looked at the water, dark and cold. She forgot that Elena is the one who taught me how to survive. Let them come. The legal system is designed to be a machine of cold logic. But in family court matters, It often feels like a surgical theater where the patient is awake and the anesthesiologist is on a coffee break. We filed the motion to quash the subpoena for my grandmother's medical records on a rainy Tuesday. Kendra had crafted the argument with the precision of a diamond cutter. We argued that Elena Navarro's medical history was irrelevant to the core facts of the defamation case and that the request was a harassment tactic designed to intimidate a witness. Judge Calloway, a woman with reading glasses perched precariously on the end of her nose, read the filings in silence while Warren Sloan shifted his weight in his expensive loafers. "Mr. Sloan," the judge said, looking over her spectacles, "you are asking for 5 years of comprehensive medical history for a non-party witness. This seems excessive, Your Honor," Sloan said, his voice smooth as aged scotch. "Ms. Navarro is the plaintiff's primary witness. Her cognitive state is central to the credibility of the so-called evidence she has provided. If she is confused, or if she is being manipulated due to cognitive decline, the court needs to know." I sat with my hands clasped under the table, digging my fingernails into my palms. I wanted to stand up and scream that my grandmother was sharper than everyone in the room combined. The judge sighed. She took off her glasses. "I will allow a limited inquiry," she ruled. "You may depose Ms. Navarro's primary care physician regarding her competency to testify. You may not access her general medical files, her therapy notes, or her history of physical ailments unrelated to cognitive function." "And Mr. Sloan?" "Yes, Your Honor. If I smell even a whiff of harassment, or if this turns into a fishing expedition to embarrass an elderly woman, I will sanction you so fast your head will spin. Is that clear?" "Crystal, Your Honor." It was a partial victory. We had built a wall around Elena, but there was still a gate, and Sloan was going to try to batter it down. But while we were playing defense on Elena's health, Kendra was playing offense on the facts. 2 days later, she called me into her office. She looked tired, but triumphant. She slapped a folder onto the desk. "We got them," she said. I opened the folder. Inside were 2 sworn affidavits. The first was from a recruiter at a boutique finance firm in Boston. I had applied there 3 weeks ago, just to test the waters. Affidavit of Sarah Jenkins. It read, "On November 14th, I received a phone call from a woman identifying herself as Marla Sanchez. She stated that she was the mother of the applicant, Alice Sanchez. She advised me that Alice had been dismissed from previous employment for theft, and that the family was currently seeking legal guardianship due to Alice's mental instability." The second affidavit was the kill shot. It was from the staffing agency manager who had cut me loose from the North Line placement. He had felt guilty. When Kendra's investigator approached him, he had cracked. Attached to his statement was a grainy black and white photocopy of a caller ID log from the agency's digital phone system. Incoming call, 508-555-0192. Duration, 12 minutes. Caller name, Sanchez. DM, that is their home number. I whispered, "It puts Marla in the room." Kendra said, "It puts the phone in her hand, and the timestamp matches the exact moment the manager said he received the warning. It is not hearsay anymore. Alice, it is a documented event. We did not stop there. Kendra served a subpoena on Ronan Decker. I went with her to the deposition. It was held in a sterile conference room at a court reporting service." Ronan looked annoyed. He checked his watch 3 times in the first 5 minutes. "Mr. Decker," Kendra asked, her voice deceptively light, "you previously stated that you processed a loan for Alice Sanchez in 2015. "That is correct," Ronan said. "And you stated that you never met Alice Sanchez in person." "I handle hundreds of loans," Ronan said. "I cannot recall every face." Kendra slid the affidavit from the recruiter across the table. "Mr. Decker, we are building a case for criminal fraud and identity theft against Marla Sanchez. If you cover for her, you become an accessory. If you tell the truth, you are just a businessman who was duped. Which one do you want to be?" Ronan looked at the affidavit. He looked at Kendra. He looked at me. He saw that we were not going away. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file. I brought the internal notes. He said quietly. He handed over a printout of the loan processing log. August 12, 2015. Notes. Application received via drop-off. Mother, Marla, vouched for income. Docs appear complete. Expedited fee applied. August 14th, 2015. Notes. Email from Marla S. at provider.net. Confirming wire instructions. Funds disbursed to joint account ending in 8840. He looked at me. She told me you were in rehab, Ronan said. I blinked. Excuse me? She said you were in a facility for substance issues, he said. She said you needed the money to pay for the treatment, but you could not come in to sign because you were on lockdown. She cried in my office. She said she was trying to save your life. I felt the air leave my lungs. She used my appendix surgery. I realized I was in the hospital for a week. She told the world I was a drug addict. That is why I processed it so fast, Ronan said. I thought I was helping a desperate mother. I walked out of that deposition feeling dirty. I felt a layer of grime on my skin that no shower could wash off. For 5 years, I had walked around thinking I was living a normal life. Meanwhile, in the shadows, my mother had been painting a portrait of me as a thief, a drug addict, a mental case. She had built a phantom Alice, a monster, and she had sold that monster to anyone who would listen. I went home. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. I looked at my own eyes. They looked haunted. I realized then that on some level, I had started to believe them. When you are told for 30 years that you are clumsy, that you are forgetful, that you are bad with money, you start to act that way. You double-check the stove because you assume you left it on. You count your change 3 times because you assume you miscounted. I gripped the edge of the sink. I did not steal. I said to the mirror, my voice sounded small. I did not steal. I said louder. I am not clumsy. I am not an addict. I am not a thief. I said it until my throat hurt. I said it until the words stopped sounding like a defense and started sounding like a fact. I was deprogramming myself. 2 days later, I ran into my father. It was not a planned confrontation. I was at the pharmacy picking up a prescription for Elena. Dennis was in the aisle, looking at blood pressure monitors. He looked older. His skin was gray, hanging loosely on his frame. He saw me and froze. Alice, he said, I did not run. I did not scream. I just stood there, holding a box of heart medication. Hello, Dad. He looked around to make sure no one was listening. Alice, this has to stop. Your mother. She is not sleeping. She is pacing the house all night. Then tell her to stop calling my employers. I said. Dennis rubbed his face with his hand. We were just trying to help. He mumbled. Help? I asked. By telling a lender I was in rehab? By forging my name? We were drowning. Alice, he hissed. The anger flashed in his eyes. Sudden and pathetic. We were drowning. The market crashed. The house was leveraged to the hilt. We had nothing. We drained the 401k. We had creditors calling every hour. So you stole my identity to pay them off? We paid it back, he insisted. We fixed it. And the job sabotage? I asked. How does that help? He slumped. The anger evaporated, leaving only a sad, defeated man. We needed you home, he said quietly. We needed to know you were there. Marla said if you were out in the world, you would get hurt. She said if we brought you home, we could pool our resources. We could keep the family together. Resources. I said, you mean my trust? Dennis flinched. You do not understand, he said. It is not just money. It is the business. We could lose everything. I looked at him. I saw a man who had spent 40 years making himself small so his wife could feel big. He was not evil in the way Marla was evil. He was weak, and his weakness was just as dangerous. I am not coming home. Dad, I said, and I am not a resource. I am your daughter. Or I was. I walked away. He did not follow me. I went straight to Elena's. Grandma, I said, I need to know about the trust. Dad just admitted they are broke. He said they leveraged the house. He said they need the business. Elena nodded. She gestured for me to sit. It is time you knew the details, she said. She pulled a thick binder from her bookshelf. Greenridge Supply Company, she said. Your grandfather started it in 1960. We make industrial fasteners, bolts, screws, brackets. It is the most boring business on earth. And it is profitable? Very, Elena said. We have contracts with the military. We have contracts with the state. The company clears $2 million a year in profit. And who owns it? I own 40%. Elena said, Marla owns 20%, Dennis owns 20%, and the remaining 20% is held by a silent partner in Chicago. So they have 40% combined. I said, and you have 40? Exactly, Elena said, and the bylaws state that any sale of the company requires a 60% majority vote. I did the math. As long as you say no, they cannot sell, and I have said no for 10 years. Elena said, they want to sell to a private equity firm. They have an offer on the table for $8 million. $8 million, I whispered. Marla and Dennis have already spent their share in their heads. Elena said, they took out loans against the expectation of that sale. They bought the house in Larkspur Hollow. They bought the cars. They went on vacations. They lived like millionaires on credit, waiting for me to die or give in. But you did not die. I said, no, Elena said with a grim smile. I am stubborn. So they needed my shares. I said, when I die, my 40% goes into a trust for you. Elena said, you become the deciding vote. If you say no, the sale dies. They lose everything. They go bankrupt. I sat back. It all made sense. The sabotage, the gaslighting, the narrative of instability. If I was competent, I would control their fate. If I was declared incompetent, or if I was so broken and destitute that I crawled back to them. Marla would become my guardian. She would control the trust. She would vote to sell the company. It was not just control, it was survival. They were trying to destroy me to save themselves from financial ruin. They are desperate. I said, and desperate people are dangerous, Elena said. A week later, the court ordered us to mediation. It was held in a glass-walled conference room at the courthouse. The mediator was a retired judge, a man named Mr. Henderson who spoke in a soft, soothing murmur. Marla and Dennis sat on one side of the table. Warren Sloan sat between them. Kendra and I sat opposite. Marla looked perfect. She was wearing a pale blue cardigan and no jewelry. She wore minimal makeup. She looked like the victim. She looked like a mother who had been dragged through hell by an ungrateful child. Alice, Marla said the moment we sat down. She reached across the table, her hand hovering in the air. I am so sorry it has come to this. I did not take her hand. I looked at the mediator. Can we begin? I asked. Marla pulled her hand back, wiping a tear from her eye. We are here to find a resolution. Mr. Henderson said. Mr. Sloan, would you like to start? We are prepared to offer a comprehensive settlement, Sloan said. My clients are willing to pay $10,000 toward Alice's legal fees. They are willing to sign a non-disparagement agreement. In exchange, we ask for a dismissal of all claims and a private statement of apology from Alice regarding the family misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? Kendra said sharply. We have affidavits proving defamation. We have proof of identity theft. Marla spoke up. Her voice was trembling. We just want to heal, she said. She looked at me, her eyes wet and pleading. Alice, we made mistakes. We were worried about you. We overstepped. I admit that. But we did it out of love. We just want to be a family again. I watched her. It was a masterclass. If I had not known better, I would have believed her. I would have felt guilty for dragging this poor, loving woman into court. But I saw the tension in her jaw. I saw the way her eyes did not quite match the tremor in her voice. What do you want, Mom? I asked. I want you to come home, she said. We can pay off your debts. We can help you get back on your feet. We can put this ugly business behind us. Just sign the paper. Admit that we were all under stress. Admit that you struggle sometimes. so we can move on. There it was. Admit you struggle. She did not want reconciliation. She wanted ownership. She wanted me to sign a document that validated her narrative. She wanted to buy my silence with $10,000 and a roof over my head, so that when Elena died, she could use that same document to prove I was unfit to manage the trust. I stood up. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "I am not signing anything." "Alice, please," Dennis said. He looked terrified. "I am not struggling." "Dad," I said, "I am not unstable, and I am not coming home to save you from your bad investments." Marla's face changed. The mask slipped. The sadness vanished, replaced by a cold, hard glare. "You are being selfish," she snapped, "just like your grandmother." I leaned over the table. "You want the voting rights," I said. "You want to sell Greenridge Supply. That is what this is about. You destroyed my career because you need my inheritance to pay your debts." Marla went pale. Warren Sloan put a hand on her arm to silence her, but she shook him off. "That money belongs to the family," she hissed. "Not to you. You did not earn it, and you did not earn the right to destroy my name." I said. I looked at the mediator. "The mediation is over." I said, "We will see you in court." I walked out. I heard Marla screaming my name as the heavy door swung shut behind me. I went back to Elena's apartment. I told her everything. She listened, nodding slowly. "It is time," she said. She asked me to set up my phone on a tripod in her living room. She sat in her favorite armchair, the one with the floral pattern. She smoothed her skirt. She fixed her hair. "Are you ready?" I asked. She nodded. I pressed record. "My name is Elena Maria Navarro," she began. Her voice was clear, strong, and devoid of fear. "I am of sound mind and body. I am recording this statement to be used in the legal proceedings regarding my granddaughter, Alice Sanchez." She looked directly into the lens. "For 30 years, I have watched my daughter, Marla Sanchez, systematically undermine her own child. I have watched her lie. I have watched her manipulate. And I have watched her steal." She held up the sealed envelope. "The documents I have provided are not forgeries. They are the receipts of a lifetime of betrayal. I kept them because I knew that one day, Marla's greed would outweigh her love. That day has come." She took a breath. "My granddaughter is not a thief. She is not mentally ill. She is the victim of a parent's desperation, and if anything happens to me, if my health fails, or if my mind clouds, let this recording stand as my final testimony. Alice is the only one telling the truth." I stopped the recording. Elena slumped back in the chair, exhausted. "Thank you. Grandma," I whispered. "Save it," she said. "Save it in 3 places." The next day, Judge Calloway set the date. We were moving to a hearing on our motion for summary judgment. It was a high-stakes maneuver. We were asking the judge to rule that the evidence was so overwhelming that we did not need a full trial, that Marla and Dennis were liable as a matter of law. If we won, it was over. I would get damages, a permanent injunction, and my name back. If we lost, or if the judge decided there was enough ambiguity to go to trial, the fight would drag on for months. Sloan would have time to depose Elena. He would have time to twist the narrative. The medical bills would pile up. The rent would come due. Kendra called me with the date. "November 20th. She said, 2 weeks, Alice. She warned, "This is it. If we win, you are free. But the fallout?" "I know." I said, "If I won, I would bankrupt my parents. I would expose them to criminal charges for the fraud. I would likely never speak to them again. I would be an orphan in every way that mattered. But if I lost, I would be the thief. I would be the crazy daughter. I would be the girl who needed a warning label." I hung up the phone. I looked at the calendar. November 20th, Judgment Day. The air in Briar Glen Superior Courtroom 4 was colder than the November wind outside. It smelled of lemon floor polish, dry paper, and the distinct, metallic scent of anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the Great Seal of Massachusetts hanging above the judge's bench. I felt a strange, floating sensation, as if I were underwater looking up at the surface. I was 33 years old, but in this room, I was being discussed as if I were a case file, a problem to be solved, a collection of disputed facts rather than a human being. On the other side of the aisle, my parents sat with their attorney, Warren Sloan. Marla was wearing a navy blue suit that I had never seen before. It was conservative, humble even. She held a tissue in her hand, dabbing occasionally at dry eyes. Dennis sat next to her, staring fixedly at a knot in the wood of the table. He looked like a man waiting for a medical diagnosis he already knew was terminal. I felt the dissociation creeping in, that numbness that had become my armor over the last few months. It was easier to float away than to acknowledge that the two people sitting 20 feet away, the people who had taught me to tie my shoes, were paying a man $400 an hour to prove I was crazy. Then the door at the back of the courtroom opened. I turned. Elena Navarro walked in. She was using her cane, moving slowly, but her chin was lifted high. She wore her best Sunday coat and a silk scarf tied around her neck. She did not look at my parents. She walked straight to the first row of the gallery directly behind me and sat down. She caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The numbness evaporated. I felt the ground under my feet again. I was not a case file. I was Elena's granddaughter, and I was here to fight. All rise. The bailiff called out. Judge Calloway entered. She was a woman in her 60s with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the attorneys. We are here on the plaintiff's motion for a preliminary injunction and the defendant's motion to dismiss. Judge Calloway said. Her voice was dry and devoid of patience. I have read the briefs. Ms. Holt, you may proceed. Kendra stood up. She looked small next to the pile of evidence boxes on our table, but when she spoke, her voice filled the room. Your Honor, Kendra began, this case is not about a family dispute. It is about a systematic, documented campaign of defamation and tortious interference designed to destroy the livelihood of Alice Sanchez. We are not asking the court to mediate a dinner table argument. We are asking the court to stop the defendants from contacting Ms. Sanchez's employers and accusing her of crimes she did not commit. She walked to the evidence table. We have submitted 3 affidavits from professional recruiters. Kendra said, Exhibit A is the sworn statement of Sarah Jenkins. On November 14th, at 10 in the morning, she received a call from Marla Sanchez. Mrs. Sanchez stated, as a matter of fact, that Alice Sanchez had been fired for theft. Kendra held up the document. Exhibit B is the call log from Northline Office Services. It confirms a 12-minute call from the defendant's home line to the hiring manager who subsequently terminated Alice's contract. Warren Sloan stood up. He smoothed his tie. Objection. Your Honor, he said. His voice was rich and soothing, like a radio host's. We do not dispute that calls were made. We dispute the characterization. My client, Mrs. Sanchez, was acting out of genuine maternal concern. She did not say Alice stole. She said Alice had struggled with financial confusion. In the context of a family with a history of helping a troubled child, this is protected speech. It is an opinion, not defamation. Kendra did not flinch. If it were merely opinion, Your Honor, that might be a defense, she said, but we have proof of objective fabrication. She pulled up a large poster board on an easel. It was the timeline Marla had sent to Harbor Light Logistics. Exhibit C. Kendra said, This is a letter Marla Sanchez sent to a potential employer. In it, she lists specific dates of alleged theft. She claims that on August 4th, 2019, Alice Sanchez stole jewelry from the family safe in Larkspur Hollow. Kendra slapped a travel itinerary onto the poster. On August 4th, 2019. Alice Sanchez was in Mexico. Kendra said, Here are the flight records. Here is the hotel receipt. Here's a time-stamped photo of her on a beach 3,000 miles away. She could not have stolen from a safe in Massachusetts. This is not a mother's concern. Your Honor, this is a lie, a calculated, verifiable lie. The courtroom was silent. I saw Dennis shift in his seat. Marla did not move. She stared straight ahead at the judge, her expression unreadable. Kendra moved to the next board, and regarding the defendant's claim that they were protecting Alice from her own substance abuse issues, Kendra continued, her voice hardening. We have the deposition of Ronan Decker, a loan officer. She held up the transcript. Mr. Decker testified under oath that Marla Sanchez told him Alice was in a drug rehabilitation facility in August of 2015. She used this falsehood to explain why Alice could not sign loan documents in person, documents Marla Sanchez then forged. Kendra looked at the judge. Alice Sanchez was not in rehab. Your Honor, she was in the surgical ward of Briar Glen General Hospital, having an emergency appendectomy. We have the medical records. The defendants used a medical emergency to frame their daughter as an addict, solely to expedite a fraudulent loan. Sloan stood up again. Your Honor, this is ancient history, he said. Sounding bored. The loan was paid back. The plaintiff is trying to drag up old dirt to embarrass her parents. This is a classic shakedown. The plaintiff is upset because her parents have cut her off financially, and she is using the court to bully them into a settlement. He walked toward the bench. The real issue here, Your Honor, is undue influence. The plaintiff is being directed by her grandmother, Elena Navarro, who is unfortunately suffering from cognitive decline. Ms. Navarro has been weaponizing her potential estate to control Alice, and Alice, in turn, is attacking her parents to secure her inheritance. This is not about defamation. It is about a trust fund. I felt the blood rush to my face. I looked at Elena. She sat stone still, her hands clutching the head of her cane. They were calling her senile in open court. They were erasing her agency just like they had tried to erase mine. Kendra walked back to our table. She picked up the sealed envelope. It was open now, the red wax broken. Mr. Sloan wants to talk about the trust, Kendra said quietly. So let us talk about the trust. She pulled out the notarized letter. The paper was yellowed with age. Exhibit F, Kendra said. This is a sworn statement written and notarized by Elena Navarro 7 years ago. She handed a copy to the bailiff, who took it to the judge. Please read the highlighted paragraph, Your Honor, Kendra said. Judge Calloway put her glasses back on. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. The judge read aloud, her voice echoing slightly. I, Elena Navarro, fear that my daughter Marla intends to challenge my competency to gain control of the Green Ridge Supply voting shares. Marla has stated to me, in private, that if Alice does not agree to sell the company, she will ruin Alice's professional reputation to ensure Alice is deemed unfit to serve as trustee. I am writing this to establish that any future attacks on Alice's character should be viewed through the lens of this threat. The judge lowered the paper. She looked at Marla. For the first time, Marla looked away. A flush of red crept up her neck. This was written 7 years ago? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor, Kendra said. Before any of the alleged thefts, before any of the calls, Elena Navarro predicted this exact scenario because Marla Sanchez threatened it. This proves premeditation. This proves the motive is not maternal concern. The motive is a hostile takeover of a family asset. Warren Sloan looked at the letter. He looked at Marla. He whispered something to her, and she shook her head violently. I would like to call Dennis Sanchez to the stand, Kendra said. Dennis stood up. He looked like he was walking to the gallows. He took the oath, his voice barely a whisper. Mr. Sanchez, Kendra said, standing at the podium. You stated in your affidavit that you and your wife only began contacting Alice's employers in October of this year, after you became worried about her behavior. Is that correct? Yes, Dennis said. We were worried, and you never contacted anyone before that date? No, he said. Kendra picked up a piece of paper. Mr. Sanchez, do you recognize this phone number? Dennis squinted at it. That is my cell phone. And do you recall a call placed on September 12th to the staffing agency Pro-Tem Solutions? Dennis froze. He looked at Marla. She was staring at the table, refusing to give him a signal. I might have called them, Dennis stammered. Why? Kendra asked. I think Marla asked me to check if Alice was working there. He said, "So you called them in September?" Kendra said, "A full month before you claim your worry began. And did you tell them Alice was a thief?" I did not use that word. Dennis said quickly, "I just said, we had concerns about money." Kendra pounced. "Mr. Sanchez, in your affidavit, you swore you made no calls before October 15th. You just admitted you called in September. Which is the lie? The affidavit, or your testimony right now?" Dennis crumbled. He physically slumped in the chair. "We were just trying to stop her." He whispered. "Stop her from what?" Kendra asked. "From leaving," Dennis said. His voice broke. "We needed her to stay. Marla said if she got that job at Harbor Light, she would move away. She would not need us. We needed her to need us." The admission hung in the air like smoke. It was not about theft. It was not about addiction. It was about possession. Kendra looked at the judge. No further questions. Judge Calloway looked at Dennis. "You may step down. Mr. Sanchez." Dennis walked back to the table. He did not look at Marla. Marla did not look at him. The distance between their chairs seemed to have grown by miles. The judge cleared her throat. She stacked the papers in front of her. "I have heard enough," she said. She took off her glasses and looked directly at Marla. "Mrs. Sanchez," the judge said, "in 30 years on the bench, I have seen families do terrible things to each other, but I have rarely seen a parent go to such elaborate lengths to sabotage their own child's ability to eat and pay rent." Marla opened her mouth to speak, but the judge held up a hand. "Do not," the judge warned. "The evidence presented today suggests a likelihood of success on the merits for the plaintiff's claims of defamation and tortious interference." The judge ruled, "The inconsistencies in the defendant's timeline, the documentary evidence of the forged loan, and the testimony regarding the trust fund motive are compelling." She picked up her gavel. "I am issuing a preliminary injunction effective immediately. Marla and Dennis Sanchez are hereby restrained from contacting, directly or indirectly, any current, past, or prospective employer of Alice Sanchez. You are forbidden from contacting her recruiters, her references, or her colleagues. If I hear that you have so much as whispered Alice's name to a hiring manager, I will hold you in contempt of court, and I will put you in a cell. Do you understand?" "We understand, Your Honor," Sloan said quietly. "Furthermore," the judge said, "I am denying the defendant's motion to dismiss. This case will proceed to trial. And Mr. Sloan?" "Yes, Your Honor." "You will withdraw your subpoena for Miss Navarro's medical records." The judge said, "The court finds that Ms. Navarro's foresight in documenting these events demonstrates a cognitive sharpness that frankly exceeds that of anyone else in this room. The motion to compel is denied." She banged the gavel. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "Court is adjourned." I sat there for a moment, unable to move. I had won. The order was signed. They couldn't call anyone. I was safe. Kendra turned to me and smiled. "We did it. Alice, the injunction is bulletproof." I looked back at the gallery. Elena was already standing up, adjusting her scarf. She looked exhausted, but she gave me a small, tired smile. We gathered our things. I felt a sense of relief. But it was heavy, wet relief. Not the buoyant joy I had expected. I had stripped my parents naked in a public courtroom. I had watched my father disintegrate on the stand. We walked out of the double doors into the hallway. A flash of light blinded me. Alice Sanchez. A woman with a recorder and a man with a camera were waiting. "I am from the Briar Glen Ledger," the woman said, stepping into my path. "We saw the court filings. Is it true your parents forged a loan in your name? Are you accusing them of fraud to take control of Greenridge Supply?" I recoiled. How did they know? "The filings are public record," Kendra whispered, stepping in front of me. "No comment." "My client has no comment." "Ms. Sanchez," the reporter yelled as we pushed past, "your mother claims this is elder abuse. Do you have a response?" I kept my head down, my heart hammering. I had won the legal battle, but I had rung the bell. The story was out. In a town the size of Briar Glen, a lawsuit like this was not a legal procedure. It was a spectator sport. Everyone would know. The hiring managers I applied to next week would not just see a resume, they would see the girl who sued her parents. I reached the end of the corridor near the elevators. I needed to find a bathroom. I needed to breathe. I turned the corner, and there she was. Marla was standing by the water fountain. She was alone. Dennis must have gone to bring the car around. She looked at me. Her face was perfectly composed again. The tears were gone. The fear she had shown when the letter was read was gone. She looked like she always did, immaculate and untouchable. I stopped. Marla took a step toward me. She did not raise her voice. She stepped in close, invading my personal space, smelling of the same lavender perfume she had worn my entire life. "You think you won," she said softly. "The judge ordered you to stop," I said, my voice shaking. "If you call anyone, you go to jail." Marla smiled. It was a terrifying, genuine smile. "I do not need to call anyone." "Alice," she whispered, "what do you mean?" "Briar Glen is a small place." She said, "People talk. They talk at the salon. They talk at the church. They talk at the club." She leaned in closer, her lips brushing my ear. "You can win paperwork, Alice, but you cannot make people like you." She pulled back, her eyes hard and bright. "You will always be the daughter who sued her own mother," she said. "You will always be the girl with the scandal. You can wave that court order around all you want, but no one invites a liability to dinner, and no one hires a lawsuit." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I stood there, feeling the cold seep into my bones. She was right. The law could stop her from picking up the phone. But it could not stop the poison she had already injected into the community. It could not stop the whispers. She knew how to destroy me without breaking a single injunction. It was social poison, and there was no antidote in the legal code. I found Elena sitting on a bench near the exit, waiting for me. She looked frail. The adrenaline of the hearing had worn off, leaving her gray and trembling. I sat down next to her. She said, "It is not over," I whispered. Elena took my hand. She felt the coldness of my skin. "She is right," Elena said. "It is never over with her, not really." We sat in silence for a long time, watching the lawyers and clerks bustle past. "Alice," Elena said finally, "we have a choice." "What choice?" I asked. "We are going to trial." The judge denied their motion. "Yes," Elena said. "We can go to trial. We can drag them through discovery for 6 months. We can put Ronan Decker on the stand. We can put Gerald Pike on the stand. We can expose every lie, every theft, every manipulation. We can get a verdict that says, in black and white, that you are innocent and they are guilty. That is what we want. Is not it?" I asked. "Is it?" Elena asked. She turned to face me. "If we go to trial, it will be in the papers every day. The reporter from the Ledger will be there every morning. Your name will be synonymous with this war. You will win. Alice, I have no doubt. But you will have to burn the family to the ground to do it. You will never speak to your cousins again. You will be a pariah in this town. And Marla. Marla will fight until she is bankrupt, and then she will play the martyr who was destroyed by her vicious daughter." I looked at the floor. I thought about the reporter. I thought about the way people looked at me in the grocery store. "What is the other option?" I asked. "Settlement," Elena said. "But we rejected the settlement. We rejected their settlement." Elena said, "Now we dictate the terms." She pulled a notepad from her purse. "I spoke to Kendra while you were in the bathroom." Elena said, "We offer them this. They sign over their voting rights in Greenridge Supply to me. Effective immediately. They sign a retraction letter that we can show to any employer privately. They pay your legal fees. And in exchange? In exchange, we drop the lawsuit." Elena said, "We seal the record. The reporter gets nothing. The scandal dies down. You get your career back. You get your peace. But they get away with it." I said. They do not get punished publicly. Elena squeezed my hand hard. Justice is not always a gavel. Alice, she said, justice is living your life. If we take the settlement, you take away their power. You take away the company. You take away their ability to hurt you. You leave them with their big house and their debts and their silence. She looked at me with fierce, loving eyes. You can spend the next year fighting them in the mud, or you can take the victory and walk away. You can leave Briar Glen. You can start over. You can be Alice Sanchez, operations manager, not Alice Sanchez, plaintiff. I looked toward the door where the reporter was still waiting. I looked back toward the courtroom where the judge had validated my truth. I thought about Marla's voice. You cannot make people like you. If I went to trial, I would prove her wrong legally, but I might prove her right socially. I would be the winner of a graveyard. But if I settled, if I took the control of the company and the retraction, I could vanish. I could leave this toxic zip code. I could go to Boston, or New York, or anywhere. I looked at Elena. She was offering me a way out, a way to win the war by ending the battle. But part of me, the part that had been humiliated, starved, and gaslit, wanted to see them burn. I wanted to see the jury read the verdict. I wanted the world to know what they did. I stood up. The hallway stretched out in front of me, leading to the exit, leading to the rest of my life. I have to decide, I said. Elena nodded. Yes, you do. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of lemon polish and old paper one last time. I looked at my grandmother, the woman who had saved me, and I realized that the greatest revenge was not destruction. It was indifference. It was success. It was happiness. But was I strong enough to walk away without the final public blow? I adjusted my coat. I took Elena's arm. Let us go talk to Kendra, I said. We walked toward the exit, past the reporter, past the courtroom, walking together into the uncertain, open air of the afternoon. The choice was mine, and for the first time in my life, I was not afraid to make it. Thank you so much for listening to My Parents Told Every Employer I Was a Thief. Grandma had already prepared for that. I hope you enjoyed this story of betrayal, legal battles, and the unbreakable bond between a grandmother and her granddaughter. It was a journey through the dark side of family dynamics, but also a testament to standing up for your own truth. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Please let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more dramas about revenge, family secrets, and justice, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in English in the comments. What would you have done in Alice's shoes? Would you take the settlement and walk away? Or would you go to trial and burn it all down? I read every comment, and I can't wait to see what you think. Until next time, stay safe and keep fighting for your truth.